Hey everybody, this is just going to be a quick video showing how to set up some simple audio organization structures for UE5 using base Unreal Engine 5 audio and meta sounds. The other day I was on YouTube just looking for some quick reference material for this sort of thing and couldn't find a whole lot, so I'm just making this video as a reference for myself and figured it could be useful to some of you guys as well. We're going to go over things like sound classes, submixes, control bus mixes, and some really basic sidechain setup, as well as just initial folder structure and naming scheme. There's a lot of ways you can set up a project, and every project kind of needs something different, but this is just what I do initially when I first get on a project. To start, I just have the third person map template open that comes with base Unreal 5. And the first thing is going to be our folder structure. So I'll go ahead and open the basic folder structure that I like to do over here when I start. Off the bat, you can see on the side here. But just to go through it a little bit, the first thing that I create is a audio folder, which is going to house all the audio for the project. Sounds are going to be split into two categories. Music, which you can organize however you want, and sound effects, which I like to split into the following categories. Cinematics, environment, general, UI, and VO. The only thing of note here is that environment, when you click on it, is going to be split between basic ambiances. These can be relatively 2D and very wide ambiances versus POI ambiances, which are smaller, more attention-grabbing ambiances. Um, in addition to this folder structure, this is going to be our naming scheme for a lot of our sounds. So I went ahead and loaded in a few temporary sounds. So you can see here this sound is called SFX UI click, which follows the folder structure. Same thing here with this environment sound that I have in here in the ambience. This is going to be called SFX ambience truckload. Now I did go ahead and skip this environment thing for the folder structure just for the sake of name simplicity, but you can do whatever you want with that. Another note for your sound waves, make sure that you are importing them into your source control if you're using it first, before importing it into Unreal. Like put it in a raw wave file folder inside of source control. That way, the source file location will also be contained within source control. That's an important step there. All right, once we have our initial folder structure created, the next step is to make some sound classes. So we're going to go into the sound class folder, right click, you can type in sound class up here, and we're going to name it sound class underscore master and save it. We can open it up. Now, for me, in sound classes, I only use this to distribute information to sounds that I put in that sound class. So what I mean by that is all of these values over here, any sound that we put in this sound class is going to inherit these values. So I don't use sound classes for mixing. I'm going to use submixes for that. But sound classes is going to be how I bulk distribute information to the category of sounds. So my sound class structure is actually going to follow this down here, which is my folder structure. So after audio, you'll see what I mean here in a second. Also, another thing, sound classes, flow, you start them, the children go to the right, where submixes, later on you'll see the children go to the left. Kind of confusing, but just something to keep in mind. So we're going to drag out for children here and call this sound class music. And then we're going to do another one here for SFX. And then we're going to do another one here. You'll see what I mean. Sound class underscore SFX underscore general. And this follows the folder structure that I have here. So you can see we have the sound class SFX and then the subclass general. And we're going to make one for each one of these folder structures as well. All right, and once we're done making the sound class, we can jump into submixes. Submixes is where I like to do most of my sound mixing. So if we just type in submix, we can make a new one, and we're going to call this SM for submix underscore master, just like that. Save and double click it. And like I said earlier, instead of the children being to the right for submixes, the children are going to actually be to the left, and we're going to mirror our folder structure just like we did for the sound classes here. So I'll go ahead and do that. All right, the submix hierarchy is done, and as you can see, it mirrors both our sound class hierarchy and our folder structure hierarchy, and then also our naming scheme as well in general. So just a really good way to keep everything consistent. Because we are using sound classes to distribute information bulk-wise to all of our sounds, we can actually use the sound classes to distribute our submix to each sound that we want it to go to. So we're just going to link each sound class with its corresponding submix like this in the default submix over here. So we're going to look for master and UI. And then once we have all these set up, whatever sound that we assign to this sound class is also going to be assigned its correct default submix. Now you could, in the sounds themselves, assign it to its correct submix instead of the sound class, but just with the way I like things structured, I like my sound classes to distribute the information and submixes to be just for mixing purposes, so you can do it whichever way sounds good to you. If we look into one of our meta sounds here, this is where we would assign our sound class. So because this is a UI sound, this would go in UI. And because we have it there, whenever this sound plays, it will be routed to the correct submix because it is labeled as such here. So once we have our submix hierarchy set up, we can get into some control buses. To get into control buses and in our audio mix modulation are where they're going to go. It's called modulation because that's the name of the plugin that we need to turn on. So if you go into your plugin sections and look for modulation right here, you're going to want to turn on audio modulation. This is the Unreal 5 part of it. It is a default implementation you can see. So I believe it comes with every version of Unreal Engine 5 that you have. If you have 5.5 or greater for sure, it should be there. You can just tick it on. That'll give us access to control buses. So moving in the control bus folder, control buses are pretty much knobs to turn things up and down. They can be assigned different values. You can think of them as gameplay or game parameters from Wise or just global and local parameters from Fmod. So they can be used for a lot of different things, but we're just going to use them for volume for now. So we're going to make a control bus. And the first one is going to be called control bus master. And just like we did before, we're going to make a control bus for each one of our uh, general categories that we used in both hierarchies. We can save all these. So when you open up the control bus, you can see it's already set to this volume parameter. It can be set to a bunch of different things as well. If you don't see any of these, you just go to the setting cog and make sure you have checked both of these, and then you can see there's like a lot of built-in parameters, but we're just going to keep ours set to volume. Now, how are we going to use these control bus mixes to control our actual mix of the game? I like to use my submixes to control the mix of the game. So when we click over here on our submix hierarchy, we can go onto the master one and we're going to go to the output volume. Click modulate. We can add and then we can assign the corresponding control bus to it. So this is going to be master. Oh, looks like I forgot one actually. All right, now you can see that we have each control bus hooked up to its corresponding submix. Now the way that we actually control, so these are just like knobs, so you can imagine these as just general buses, and now we have created and put the knobs on them. But now we need to create the object that controls the knobs. It's a little confusing, but we can't actually control the knobs from here. I mean, you could, but that's not where we're going to do it from. We're going to use control bus mixes to do that. So a control bus mix is just a collection of a bunch of control buses that you can use to create mixing snapshots. So if we go to audio, modulation, and control bus mix, we're going to make our first one. So CBN for control bus mix underscore master. And this is where I would do my general top level volume mixing for my game. So when we click on it, we can add the different control buses here to play with. So I like, because this is where we're going to be doing our mixing for the game, I like to add all the ones that we just made. So we have control bus master music and sound effects. We're going to also add in the individual buses, but you can add in whatever you want here for your mixing workflow. All right, now that we have our first control bus made, you can see up here it has like activate, deactivate, that sort of thing. So these kind of work as mixing snapshots that you can turn on and off. So you can make a whole bunch of these for different situations in your game. But this is just the master one that I'm going to use for the overall mixing of the game. I also like to make another one for user controlled settings. So if we go to audio, modulation, control bus mix again, we're going to call this CBM underscore user settings. I'm going to save that, open that up. And here I generally like to add in just the top like options that you want your user to have control over. So in most games that would generally be master, music, and SFX, but you can do whatever you want here. So this is where they're going to have control over what to turn up and down. This next part is where it gets a little bit tricky. My mastering control bus could want to turn the SFX volume to like 0.5%, and the user might want to turn it down to like 0.3%. I generally like to make separate user control buses as well, just so everything is separated nicely. So I would go back in here to our control bus folder, make a new folder called user. And in here, we're just going to, instead of reusing the same control buses that we're using for our master mix, we're just going to make ones for the user as well. So I like to do these control bus underscore user and then master. And then another one for music and another one for SFX. And then these are what we're going to control here instead of our master knobs. So it's a little confusing, but it's just a way to keep that separation between what I'm doing and what the user has to control over. Once we have our new control buses hooked up in our user settings, we need to hook them up into our submixes so they actually control something. However, when we go over to our submixes, you can see that we have our original control buses hooked up in place. Now you could just go down and add another control bus here, but what I like to do instead is use something called a parameter patch. So parameter patches can do a bunch of different things. I'm still learning fully about their capability, but for the purposes of this video, we're just going to use them to combine two inputs from a control bus. So that's all we're going to use it for. We're going to use it to funnel two control bus inputs into one output. So if we go to parameter patch here and we go to audio, modulation parameter patch. We're going to call this parameter patch underscore master, and we're going to call this combined, just because it's easier for me to keep up with what they're doing that way. If we open it up here, we're going to unclick bypass. This is going to be a volume-based parameter patch because that's what we're adding. And then we're going to add in both our standard master control bus and our user-controlled master. And when we do that, if we go back to our submix, we click on our master submix, you can now see we have that master combined parameter patch available. And if we click on that, it will then use the parameter patch magic to scale both of them correctly to each other and turn up and down the master. Now in our user settings, you can see we control master, music, and SFX. So these are going to be our combined inputs. So we need to make another one here. I'm just going to copy and paste. SFX combined. And then we need to click on both the music and make sure we change it to our music and user music. And we need to click on the SFX one and make sure we change that to SFX and then user controlled SFX and save. Now if we go back to our submix, we can hook up the correct parameter patches to the corresponding submixes now. So we have our music one there and we have our SFX one here. So now we have both control bus masters combined together in a parameter patch and now controlling that submix. And just as a refresher, the submixes are assigned to the sounds through our data distribution system called sound classes. And that is through this right here. So now that we have that set up, we need to actually activate these mixes, these control bus mixes. So now in our initial scene, if we place in some of the temporary audio sounds that we have, such as a UI click, and then hit play in the scene, we should hear the UI click playing as we do. And if we go to the UI click itself and make sure that we have it assigned to the correct sound class, now whenever we go in here, if we then go to our master and hit activate mix, and if we turn up our master up and down, it turns up and down. Music won't affect it because it's underneath UI. And then if we go to our UI control bus, so we know that's working, so that's good. If we go to our user settings, our user master does not work. That's not good. Oh, it's because I have to activate the mix. There you go. So if we activate this mix as well, our user master should now work. And our user SFX should work. Now, SFX, if you remember, in our chain is the parent track to all of our individual things. So because I have it in UI, it's flowing into the SFX thing, which is now getting turned up and down. And they also now scale off of each other because of the parameter patch. So if we put the R mix down to 0.5, so you can see it's a little bit lower in volume now. Now if we go to our user settings, if we turn it down, it turns down all the way. But if we turn it all the way back up, we're still just at our 0.5 value that we already set over here. And that's because of our combined parameter patch thing that we did. All right, now that we got our parameter patches set up, we need to look at how do we actually activate these mixes in the game. How do we start with an active mix? So that's going to go in a different place in every single project, but for this temporary project, I'm just going to do it in the level blueprint. So on event begin play, activate control bus mix, we can turn them on and off. Right, so there's master, there's also a deactivate, you'll be able to see the other nodes. You can even save them to like a profile and load them later. But this is how you would turn up and down the master itself. Now for our user control settings, we're going to want to also activate our user settings, and then next we would need to update the individual control buses within this control bus mix. And that's what I have down here for you. So we're going to use something called set control bus mix by filter. So I just have simply, if you press on the keyboard 1, 2, and 3, we set the value to 0.5, 1, and 0, corresponding with the number. We're going to choose our user settings because that's what we're going to want to turn up and down. We have the value plugged in, so that would be the update that would normally come from the widget. And then we're going to use this address filter to say which setting we want to turn up and down. And you get this if you look at our user settings. You can see control bus user SFX. If we look for where that is at and click on that, you can see here the address filter. It's by default the same name as the control bus. You can change it if you want, but that's how we're going to filter for which bus that we want to turn up in the mix, in the user mix. So going back to the third person camera, these are all on user. and then it will just debug what I've turned it up to. So now if I go in here and hit play, you can hear it tapping. It should be at full volume. If I hit 1, it goes down to half volume, 2, back up to full volume, 0, turns it down all the way. So that is how you would update the individual values. Now, make sure that both mixes are active, or at least that the user mix is the user settings mix is active. Otherwise, you won't be able to turn anything up and down. It always needs to be active. You can also deactivate it. There's a deactivate node. But yeah, these would need to go. This would go somewhere in the settings menu for your user settings, and this would go somewhere in game start or just somewhere where where the project begins and you want to set your initial master mix. Um, and just to be even more clear, this would normally be like user SFX like master, right? And then this one down here would be music, and that's what you would update from the individual widget values. Now that we have gone over how to set that up, the last thing that I want to talk about is ducking. So ducking, like sidechain ducking, would be when we have a sound come in like sound effects UI, and we want that to be heard over like an ambient sound or like an environment sound here. So the easiest way to set this up would be we're going to go ahead and place in a environmental sound, the one that I had from earlier, which is this truck idling sound. So if we put this in here and hit play, we now hear both, but as you can see, we can't really hear the UI sound very much. If we go into our truck idling sounds, we need to make sure the sound class is set correctly to environment. And remember, because it's set to that sound class, this sound is now going to be routed to the correct submix of submix environment. After that, we can go into our audio folder and make the initial things that we need. So we go into the bus folder, we make a audio bus. You can just search for bus here, and we're going to call this audio bus environment, and then ducking is what I like to call it, or just duck. So now we have a bus to send audio to. Then going back in, we need to make a submix effect. Submix effect preset, and the one that we're going to choose is our submix effect dynamics processor preset here. Select, and we're going to call this SME for submix effect environment duck. So same thing, very consistent with the naming scheme. And now what this is our actual compressor. So if we click on this, you can see it's set to compressor. We can set these values to something that will actually be a sidechain. So we can set this to like, and you can see down here sidechain. So here you can actually sidechain from an entire submix, but for this purpose, we just want to do one sound. So I'm going to click audio bus, and here's our audio bus that we made called AB environment duck. So we're going to click on that and hit save. So now we have a submix effect that's supposed to duck the environment. And if we go to our environment, we can add in a submix effects chain and add in our submix effect environment duck compressor. So now that that's hooked up, the only thing that we need to do is send audio to our bus that we have hooked up inside of our compressor. So if we go into our UI click sound, you can see here I just have a simple out mono audio sending to audio bus writer, and we can select our duck just like that. So now this is just a way to control audio ducking on an individual level. So now that we have this ticking sound leading into this audio bus here, and this audio bus is hooked up to our compressor here. So it's going to take the input from this audio bus, and we have that submix effect set on our environment submix. So now when we hit play here, you can hear how it's ducking the ambient sound. And it should be as simple as that. Like I said, you can also do this through entire submixes here as well. I think you can even route like entire submixes to a bus potentially. But there's different ways to do it. That's just how I like to do it when I first initially set up a project. And that should be about it. I did the best job I could explaining it. It's kind of ended up being a little bit more than I thought. But hopefully I can edit this down in a way that makes sense, and that can be used as a quick reference to set all this up. Thank you guys for watching. Have a good one.